This is my conversation with Rob, the man behind the YouTube channel Adeptus Psychonautica. Like the name suggests, he's an adept traveler of inner space. His channel is themed around wild, incomprehensible trip reports, reviews of retreat centers in South America, and general commentary on all things in our current psychedelic era. He's also a host of the Psychonautica Panel that I've also been a part of, which gathers various YouTube creators and experts in this field. The initial reason I wanted to talk to him is because of our shared fascination with the Shipibo people and their use of medicine songs to conjure visions and healing. And because of his experience with the most powerful psychedelic of all, DMT, I knew he would have some great stories to share. And I assure you that he did not disappoint. This is the Find the Others podcast, and my name is Tyler Saucier, where I love to pick the brains of the most interesting and creative psychedelic people on Earth. I strongly believe that we can learn from each other by sharing these stories and insights. Like Terence McKenna once said, the greatest good you can do is bring back a new idea, because our world is endangered by the absence of good ideas. And I believe we all carry a piece of that puzzle. With that said, please enjoy my conversation with Adeptus Psychonautica. Rob, thank you for joining me, brother.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, mate. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, and it's been cool to get to talk to you a little bit. I came across your channel shortly before we started our Discord group and the panel thing, so I really want to thank you again for, hosting the panel and, putting all of that together, because it's been really fun. And even just as like a listener, when you post another one, I just love watching them.
Well, same. I enjoy taking part in. So, from that aspect, it's almost like a selfish kind of project, because for me, it's something I'd had in the back of my mind for a while. I'd kind of picked up the idea from watching stuff that was happening in like the political space, all these kind of like debates and panels that you see with the guys like Destiny and Vosh and stuff like that. And there's a similar thing in it's called like BreadTube. That is BreadTube. But there's lots of these like panel communities going on, and I just thought, it would be cool to have something like that for the psychedelic sort of community, because you've got all these different voices. A lot of you guys are like people that I watch on a regular basis anyway, but everyone's a little bit more detached. There's not really that central meeting point, and it just kind of became one of those things where I thought, well, if someone is going to do it, then why not me? And then Josie started the Discord group we're in, and it just seemed like, okay, this was like the universe just sending me. We're now all in one place. There's not really, or there's less of a logistical barrier to saying, hey guys, who wants to do this? And it was a good place to start floating ideas. And so, and it just, it's been a real sort of pleasure to take part in. But I will say one thing about it. It is a lot more logistic heavy than I anticipated it. But at first I was thinking, oh, this will be really like piss easy content. We'll get like 8 dudes in a room and we'll just all start going off at it. But then the coordination part of it is somewhat tricky. And then even more so with what I kind of started doing with the last one, but like bringing in like other sort of subject matter experts from sort of outside of our group and bringing them in. But it feels like a good direction to go in, and it seems like people liking that content. So I'm just that's where my main effort is at the moment in trying to grow that side of things. But overall, I want to keep the two channels going in tandem. But it's just finding that sort of balance at the moment, because the stuff I do on my main channel is quite creatively heavy, especially if it's like something like a trip report. I tend to go a bit nuts in trying to visualize some of these things. And then the like I say, the logistics of the panel stuff is also quite heavy. So I'm just navigating that medium ground. But ideally, I want to be doing a bit of equally in both, and I just need to find that kind of workflow that allows me to do that.
For sure. Well, it would be okay if we didn't have to do it every single month for you to be able to focus on your personal projects and stuff. But I love that. And the thing about being inspired by other YouTube niches is something that crossed my mind too, because Josie started the Discord group, right? But it was because I was watching this video of like Mr. Beast. You know, say what you will about his style of content, but he has methods that are practical. And one of the things he talked about was having like a group chat of other creators, and they could kind of workshop things and talk about what is working, what's not working. That way, if one person makes a huge mistake, they can just pass that along and save everyone the trouble. So I messaged Josie. I was like, we should start this group. And then she was like, yo, great idea. And then it's just incredible how one little thing like that could lead down the line to all these, you know, this blossoming of the panel groups. And I just love it, man. So,
well, that's it. Sometimes you just need that kind of soundboard almost to, you know, to bounce your idea off and validate your idea. And a lot of the times, like with something like that, you know, the panel, the conceptually, it's not really difficult. Like saying, and you know, the logistics, there is an amount of it, but the concept is, it's something that people kind of want to take part in, something I want to take part in. And so, you know, it almost kind of like bakes itself in that regard. But still, it was the same thing. Once we had that group going, and I had a similar conversation with Josie. I was like, you know, do you think we should try and recreate like the bread tube kind of thing, but for psychedelic? And just having that sounding board, and she was like, yeah, you know, we could do this. You could invite this person will say something, and so, you know, Josie like contributed a lot to that, even though, like I said, she was really just acting as a soundboard for me. But it's what I needed at that time to have that like that bit of a kick up the arse to do it. So yeah, I think these kind of groups are super helpful, and it really ties into one of the topics which we covered very early on in the panels, which was this thing of a psychedelic community. Like, what is it? And it's certainly in the time that I've been involved in like the online psychedelic community, it's, you know, there's like pockets of it on sort of Reddit, and there's like Facebook groups and stuff like that. But I didn't really see this kind of propping each other. I mean, I'd seen some stuff, you know, where people collaborate, you know, like it's like Psych Substance and your mate Tom and stuff like that. These guys had interacted a bit, but it still felt a bit like sort of, particularly with someone like Psych Substance, who was just this monolith in the you know, in like online psychedelic space. It didn't feel as kind of like it was like people. It sounds a bit derogatory. I don't mean it to come out like this, but like under his shadow kind of thing. You know what I mean? It was, and I kind of really wanted something where it felt like, actually, no, this is a completely even playing field. Like, we're all like, I'm not going to interview you guys. Let's just have a free flowing conversation, and to the point where even I might just shut up and just fade into the background here. Like, so yeah, I think I'm really interested in seeing what we can sort of do with this technology. And you know, to have this kind of community where it's not just I don't know, I'm still working out what this is, but this has just been a thing that's been stewing around in my head for ages. Like, okay, what can I do here? Like, if we talk about a psychedelic community, like, what can I do? And, you know, like, people have like, you know, said to me, oh, you know, you should organize retreats, or you should do this, and I always thought that I didn't ever think my strength was like to be like a shaman or a lead, you know, or even a facilitator or something like that. But I do think I'm pretty good at organizing shit. So that's kind of where I think I can make some sort of contribution. So I'm just putting my efforts in there for the moment.
Yeah, exactly, man. I think that's perfect. Yeah, you brought up an interesting point, which is that this wasn't even possible really until recently, with the whole video conferencing, and like, we would have been able to do it on Skype maybe 10 years ago, but quality would have.
I mean, the first few times I tried doing interviews, it was on Skype, and I think this is a cool thing about like the platform that we're using now. It's really leveled out like the quality of the playing field in terms of that you can do things and it doesn't look like a crappy Skype call, or and you don't get this kind of, you know, you can have really good quality sound. So, I mean, you know, I'm 46 now, so, you know, I've like watched all this technology. Like, I think we're living in a golden age, man. I think this is amazing. I mean, I get this vibe every time I end up in like South America and I was sitting in some kind of ceremony, and you sat there feeling this gratitude. I thought, you know, I'm thinking, wow, you know, I've flown from the other side of the world in a metal pipe so I can sit here and do, like, this is amazing. Like, you know, this is such a brilliant time to be born. So I'm always like somewhat optimistic about it when, you know, even though I'm like, oh, the world's going to shit, everything's going wrong. I'm like, dude, I'm talking to people on the other side of the world about something I'm completely passionate about. And there's all this information that is about these things that can be disseminated by even people like me across YouTube. Like, this is, it's so cool. So yeah, I'm a bit more optimistic than sort of like your average doomer, like, world sucks.
Yeah. Me too, man. Although it does get really heavy at times. I see it as a mixed bag, right? It's the whole yin and yang thing where it's like simultaneously all this horrible shit is happening while things are getting better and quality of life is improving. Technology's connecting people, more access to information. I think that's one of the ultimate keys, is this democratization of information, and the fact that someone like you and I can create a platform for ourselves. And for me, one of the big things is to disseminate information, to be that source that I didn't have when I was just having these early experiences and, like doubting my sanity, And if I would have just had someone be like, hey, this is the thing that happened, even if it's just like a vaguely similar experience, to hear that someone else has had something like that, it can be so validating, and it can make you feel like you're not alone, you're not crazy. And I feel that is such a vital thing.
Yeah, for sure. And I think what you just said is very similar to why I started making content, because I think even like yourself has commented, people like me and like Vivek, we talk in a very sort of certain way. There's a certain character, a certain bluntness to how we talk, and it's just a product of our upbringing and where we're from. But when I was first starting looking for information on psychedelics and these experiences, there wasn't really any kind of voices like that I could relate. I just wanted to know, like in everyday terms, like I'm not trying to be a guru, I'm not trying to be a shaman, I'm not all in on crystals and on falling off the new age ladder. And the science, just although interesting, it wasn't really saying anything about my human experience. And so I was kind of looking for voices like mine and wasn't really finding it. And so I just thought, right, I'll have a stab at it myself, and that's kind of what led to me making content on YouTube. And I had no idea I'd have any kind of success with it, if I could call what I've done on a channel a success. But it's certainly a success by the zero expectations that I had for it. But that's certainly one of the the biggest compliments that I get back from the stuff I put on my channel. Just like, it's kind of like this very, I try and have this kind of low bullshit, not take myself too seriously, but have an opinion on something, but be able to explain why I have an opinion. And I'm open to that opinion being wrong, but I'll not say something that I don't believe in and can back up, at least by my own standards. And I think that's I think that's the best thing with to treat these experiences, because there's so many different ways of interpreting it. But as long as particularly for someone like myself, what I tend to value is the ability to find like a cohesive narrative through one of these experiences. And as long as I can hear that, and that's one of the reasons I like gravitate towards things like trip reports, or how did these experiences affect my life, then there's some value in hearing that. It's like hearing kind of like a group share kind of thing, and if somebody describes things one way, it doesn't necessarily have to be kind of right or wrong. If you start making objective claims about that thing, then that goes into a kind of a different area. But the sort of subjective narrative experience, I think, is fascinating, and that's the bit I certainly enjoy most. That storytelling aspect and mapping that story onto, well, what does this mean to me?
Right, and it's good that you can appreciate that side of it, because it can be such a delicate balance, walking that line on being open to the stories, the narratives, and the myth making that our mind is capable of when we encounter these, liminal, numinous realms. But but maintaining your groundedness and not giving in to that or believing it too hard. So
exactly,
that's something that I see in your content, and I'm curious to know, like, where do you think that comes from? Because I know you said, you and Vivek have this kind of bluntness, the way that you were brought up. Do you think that's where the no bullshit kind of thing comes from, or are you into science? What's going on?
I think, I think that for me, that kind of, people would call it like sort of critical or skeptical sort of way to look at that. That's just how I've always been. I think that actually is a product of my upbringing. We've grown up in the UK. I don't know if you were, but like basically all the schools, or pretty much, or certainly when I was a kid, all the schools are religious schools, more or less. They were all kind of sponsored by the church. So there was a lot of religion in my upbringing, and that wasn't gelling with me at all. Just a lot about sort of how I grew up and sort of like the kind of the system that I grew up in. I was like, I kind of had really like a kind of a bullshit detector, or at least knowing what I like and what I don't like, and being able to sort of navigate by that. I was always quite opinionated, but I always liked to, whether I liked it or not, I was always compelled to have a rationale for why I was sort of acting, in a certain way, or being able to explain it. And I enjoyed that, having that aspect of that sort of logical thinking, of being able to take something and go, okay, well, why is this, and break it down. So when it came to sort of, psychedelic experiences, I would sort of map that same thing. It's really the reason why, what I just said about sort of storytelling, because it's about, okay, well, I've just had this bombastic experience, and you can either go, you can go in multiple directions, and one way is just to sort of interpret it as completely random, crazy shit. That didn't strike me as kind of being true, because there's such profundity and such, some of these things are just resonate with you on sort of levels that you don't even know you had before. So I didn't quite go for the crazy, it's just drugs. That doesn't make sense to me. Then you can go down the complete opposite of the complete, well, it's anything then. Anything is possible. It's 10th dimensional oscillating tapeworms from, Dimension Quagon, and that doesn't tell you anything either. It's just kind of falling off the New Age ladder and hitting your head on every rung on the way down. So, but the storytelling aspect feels very, it just resonates with me. We are storytelling animals. There's all this, the sort of science of psychology and psychoanalysis of, that we have these storytelling components and these archetypes, this kind of, mapping, literally telling yourself a story to understand, what has happened to you, where it comes from. And then that's in itself, it is kind of grounded within the human experience. And I think that process of storytelling is part of this, this integration process, which has become a bit of a buzzword recently, and that's something that gets on my tits. But yeah, so yeah. And when I started having these experiences, like very, bombastic experiences, then I needed a way to be able to bring this into my fairly sort of skeptical, sort of critical worldview. And so I needed to kind of like formulate my own, okay, what do I do with this? And it really just centered around, okay, be grounded, find a way to sort of work things out, find out what is this trying to tell you, and then act upon that, in a way that it's, it then has some kind of meaning to it. That to me is kind of what integration is. And I don't know. I'll expand into a little bit of a rant on this. So one of the things is this. I went to like a meeting, some like psychedelic society meeting, and they were doing a talk on integration. And like I said, it's just become such a buzzword. And I just listened to these guys just waffle on for about an hour and a half, just not actually explain it. It was like, oh, integration is like meditation. Integration is, it's when you feel it, something in your soul. It's when you find quiet time, that's integration. I just thought, no, absolutely not. Like integration is when you've had a lesson from the experience, and then you act up, you sort of change your life in a way that integrates that experience. So like, if the lesson was like, hey, I need to, let's use an example, I need to stop smoking. And then, you say, okay, well, how, but what will I do? Well, I'll stop buying cigarettes. I'll stop, or I need to, okay, I'm an alcoholic. I need to stop drinking. Well, I'm going to stop hanging around bars. I'm going to not buy or walk past the booze aisle. This would be integrating that experience. It's just too much like fluffiness and buzziness. So I think that comes back to my kind of no bullshit kind of thing. Is like, if you're going to say something, then say it and explain what it is. And I think I'm probably going to have to do a few more videos on integration because I just hate that kind of corporate buzzwordy speak aspect of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Apologies for the rant there, Tyler.
This is a rant. This is a rant acceptable zone here.
Oh God, I've got a few.
Yeah. Feel free. This is tangent encouraged space. So I feel like when it comes to, I like that you have a balance too, because I feel like some people, when they go towards the skeptical side, they can be skeptical just for the sake of being skeptical, or even become arrogant about things. And there's so much nuance too, and things that we don't know. And a lot of the best, like, smartest scientists and people will tell you, we don't know a tiniest fraction of the universe. Even if we mapped out everything about all of the matter in the universe, that's still only 5% of the observable. The rest is we don't even know. And I find myself encountering this all the time because there's so much, new age stuff that I come across that I'm like, this is just absolutely ridiculous, but there's something there. For example, like the whole Kundalini and chakras thing, like anytime I hear someone talk about that, I'm like, this sounds so silly. But I've had experiences with stuff like that. So I'm like, I know that there's something to this, but I feel like it takes a level of humility to be like, I can't just say this is the absolute truth, where you have some people, oh, I'm a light worker, this is how you activate this chakra, and they just say it like so confidently. And I'm like, dude, you're just making stuff up. People just say stuff. And another example, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that's the kind of like part of the problem is that, and this goes across like any, slightly mystical kind of thing, is that I think there are people who are genuine in that space, and that's not to say I necessarily believe in that thing or whatever. Some of it I do, some of it I don't. But then there is just some absolutely bonkers nonsense, like spewers, and it's I just don't know if this is someone who's sincere and is just completely nuts, or if this is just someone who's just completely grifting and just exploiting it. And a lot of these things are done with such visual cheese and sort of production that it's almost hard to imagine it's not being done to take advantage of it. There are some really well produced like layers of bullshit, sort of like snake oil kind of stuff out there, and yeah, I think that's the stuff that kind of like gives it, almost like gives it a bad name. But stuff like chakras and Kundalini, I personally have not had any experience. I've not really gone searching for that kind of experience. But even just the experiences I had, and this is kind of why I had to not fall into that kind of skeptical trap that you're talking about. The kind of like, oh, I'll disagree for the, just like pure skeptic, is because that just didn't align with my experiences. I could not deny that something had happened to me that it just didn't fit into a box nicely. And then the more I looked at it, I realized that it's actually, if you map it onto other things, it's not that uncommon, and that there's a lot of other places where we would allow this kind of, for want of a better word, fluffiness, and accept that as complete fact. And the one I always kind of fall back on here is love. If I said to you, or I pretty much any other member of the human species, I love my children. I would take a bullet for my children. It's that I would do almost anything that happens. And we're talking about a more or less sort of irrational thing. And you could sort of argue, well, it's because it's genetics and you're doing all this, but you could then sort of say, well, they're older now. I've done the raising them part. But that very human experience of love is just completely accepted, and it's completely fluffy. It's not, you could say, it's not necessary to the survival of the species. It feels like something transcendent, and I think that's the same with a lot of these, spiritual experiences. And I remember having my first spiritual experience, and I would say for me it came like quite late, because I'd been doing substances of various times since I was like, I think I first did like LSD when I was like 12 or 13 years old or something like that. Manchester's like a rough place. So, but I didn't have any of these kind of spiritual experiences, or not to the same degree. I had a few where I recognized something was going on, but it was only like in my 30s where I was like, holy shit, I've just had there is no other word I can describe what has just happened other than spiritual. Like, I get it. Like, this is like the feeling of falling in love. Oh, right, that's what this is. I get it. Of course, this is love. And I was like, shit, this is a spiritual experience. This thing I've been skeptical of, and like, giving sort of religious people shit for the last 30 years. And then I was like, what do I do with this? And so, again, I think if you map it onto other, what might be sort of seen as like irrational human experiences, then things like spirituality and psychedelic experiences don't seem that irrational. I just think that it's just a state, and that when you unlock that state and then you recognize that there's something desirable about that state, then it makes perfect sense, just like sort of love does.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a great way of looking at it. Another word I would use for the altered state is like a mode. It's a different mode.
That's actually a better word. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like
mode of being. Yeah.
Right, and you can come back and still be exactly how you were, or skeptical, allergic to bullshit, but then you can open yourself in this mode to these kind of irrational states of mind, and it's probably no coincidence that you mentioned love as an example, because often the spiritual and love are completely interconnected, right? Like, it's like a cliche at this point that people come out of a psychedelic experience saying love is God, love is everything, love is the answer. So I think there's absolutely something to that.
Well, I think that's my kind of musings on that would be that it's part of, you have like a psychedelic experience and you get this kind of is it synesthesia, the kind of the blending of the senses. So you hear visions and you see sound and stuff like that, and it's just this complete merging of all your senses. And I think that is something similar goes on the emotional level. So a very positive psychedelic experience could have this complete blending of gratitude, love, family, ancestry, just the mystical nature of the cosmos, and it all blends into this one thing where it's kind of almost indistinguishable. And so it's sure love is a full component of that. Of course, the flip side of it is that you can also get like absolute terror, fear, anxiety, also just blending into one thing, and sometimes confusingly like the two like mixed together. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if I fully go into this. One of the common things that comes out is like all is love. I don't know if I would ever I could get on board with that, because I think there's certainly an element of the psychedelic experience where it's there is a vastness to it's like absolutely humbling, because you're just on your knees before the most vast, wide, infinite experience, and within that you can recognize that you're a part of it, but there's also a kind of I think this is one of the humbling elements, that you are kind of more or less a gnat before this thing. And I think that's kind of, to me, it's one of the kind of very interesting parts of the psychedelic experience is that you really are walking this knife edge between absolute euphoria, but also recognizing like that a sort of like the holy shit, this is like you are on the edge of, just oceans of possible experience, both positive and sort of negative. You're trying to navigate it. On the one hand, just fathomless love and awe and wonder, and on the other hand, just like pure eldritch horror of Lovecraftian sort of things which are just beyond comprehension. And I think one of the kind of ways that I've sort of trod that path myself is to, and I don't know whether this is right or wrong, but certainly the way I view it is to sort of look at this as really the inner landscape of myself. Like this is me. Certainly I know I'm capable of the pits of despair, but also the highest highs, the happiest I will ever feel. This is coming from within my experience. So I really do see this as a sort of an inward journey, and by that I actually think that's a lot more fascinating. The idea that we have this cosmos of like broiling experience within us, to the point that some of it's even like unrecognizable to us as human beings, and the capability to explore that, I think, is much more interesting and exciting than sort of portals to aliens. So I think that stuff's a lot of fun, and I think it's good to explore, but it doesn't really speak to my human experience as much. So when I'm having those, I've certainly had a lot of experiences of like aliens and galaxies and stuff like that, and I love them, particularly like the very sci-fi kind of like DMT ones. But that's why I always try and think, okay, what is this saying about me? Like, what is the value here to me? So yeah, I think that I kind of tend to drift a lot more towards like sort of like the Jungian sort of like psychoanalytical model in that regard.
Yeah. I love it, man. I love it. Yeah, I'm also a big Carl Jung fan. So anytime that I meet a psychonaut that's into Jung, I'm like, yes, it's exciting.
Well, I mean, well, that's one of the advantages, because where I live in Switzerland, so I'm kind of like not far from Carl Jung's house. A lot of my friends are all sort of like psychoanalysts and like students at the Zurich School of Psychoanalysis. So yeah, I get to hang out with all these people, and sometimes it's a bit tiring because they're just constantly analysing everything. They're just like, they can't turn off those psychoanalysis powers, but you can really deep dive with them into sort of like mythology and sort of like the hero's journey, the heroine's journey, and sort of all this stuff. And it's such a fascinating like landscape of thought and concepts, and particularly from a guy who, to my knowledge, never even touched psychedelics. Right. And so Carl Jung's coming up with all this stuff purely just through the power of his own insight, which is amazing.
Yeah, some people just have this access to what I mean in Jungian terms, the unconscious, which I think is what a lot of psychedelics are bringing out. Maybe that's where all of this deep-seated fear and euphoria and all of that's coming up, that seems like some externality that's happening to you. It just seems like that, maybe because it's coming up from the unconscious, becoming conscious.
Yeah, I totally think so. I think that is when people talk about like the healing power of psychedelics, and particularly in the context that we hear about, which is often like ex-servicemen, military people who've had these very traumatic experiences and just don't have the vocabulary for them. Like, I don't mean like spoken vocabulary, like emotional or psychological vocabulary, as most of us don't. And because it is unconscious, you just know that you just don't feel right. I don't know why my hand is shaking. I don't know why I'm angry. It's just happening to them. Mm-hmm. And then being able to exercise that through a kind of an experience without any sort of guardrails on it, and it's just busting the sort of the doors wide open, and which in itself can lead to why it can feel so horrific and why it can feel so scary. And I've been through this myself. I was one of the main reasons I started doing things like going to South America was to work on some of my own shit. And yeah, I don't think I could have done some of that without the help of substances like ayahuasca, because they just smash the door down, and without necessarily having to have the sort of the words or the concepts or the framework to work through it, just all this stuff comes pouring out. Now that's also got a danger to it, because if you're not then in the right setting or kind of care, then you've then just got like a broken dam, and all this stuff's come flooding out, and you just feel like you're unraveling. But if it's, I've been quite fortunate with the people that I work with, that they've sort of been able to guide me through it, and sort of just help me sort of like build up my own process of, right, how do I handle these experiences. But yeah, I mean, I would 100% agree. I think that is the unconscious, and I think also when people talk about the unconscious, I think the initial thought is that we're talking about some kind of like unspoken part of the mind, but I also think it's something unspoken in the body. A lot of this kind of trauma and unconscious stuff does manifest physically. Like I said, people shaking, or people being in physical pain, which there's no actual real cause for the pain. I've had this myself, and then what I've observed and what I've experienced myself on things like ayahuasca is that you just shake this stuff out, you throw this stuff up, you purge it out, people are just like looking like they're possessed, but you work it through your body, you work it through your mind, and you can sort of reconcile those two things together. And I think that's what this healing aspect of it is. So it's that purging of the physical and the psychological unconscious.
Right. That's something that is interesting about ayahuasca. I haven't experienced it, but I've read a lot. And it's almost like, with ayahuasca, because of the purging side of it, it's almost guaranteed that it will be just as much a physical, bodily experience, where it's like, that might happen with psilocybin or LSD, where you have some kind of knot and you can wiggle it out or something. But I feel like because the purge is such a part of the ayahuasca experience, it's like it's guaranteeing that it will be both mind and body.
Yeah. I mean, for me, there is nothing else like ayahuasca after that kind of healing experience. So if I'm looking to do some sort of psychonauty stuff, if I'm looking to explore or then I wouldn't go to ayahuasca for something like that, because of all the stuff you've just mentioned. But if I feel like I've got some shit to work on, and I'm kind of like, I've not got the vocab for it, or I'm kind of stuck or whatever, that's where I go to ayahuasca. And for this reason, this is probably something where, like, Josie and I would disagree, but I don't just think it's just another psychedelic. And certainly when I've been there, and I will fully hold my hands up and say, this is just setting or being primed or whatever, or you're in this kind of jungle setting, so of course you start buying into all the the lingo around it. But I've had experiences there where, just as I've talked about having this kind of the spiritual awakening or the awakening to love or something like that, you just recognize this is medicine, this is healing, this is, like, I am not just tripping balls now, this is healing me. You can feel it. It's and it just becomes like completely obvious that there's something going on, and that's what makes it what I think is also just one of the more kind of like beautiful experiences, because you sort of you just start recognizing that the people all around you are also kind of everyone's kind of broken in their own way, or come for something, and you're all in this thing together, and it is an absolute ordeal, or it can be, particularly at the beginning when you first start one of these retreats. The first few ceremonies will tend to be quite rough on people as people are doing all this purging and stuff, but it again, it could be complete priming order, but it does feel like it works. You feel like you feel that like tension at your head. You can feel like it's sort of pulling things towards your stomach. And it's nothing like purging on mushrooms or something like that. It's insane, like where this stuff comes from, and like how you just feel it rattling up through you. And it's also, I mean, when people first look at something like ayahuasca, they think this is nuts. Why would I do this? I certainly thought this. I like, why would I want to be having, throwing up and, in the middle of like a stripping experience? It just feels unnecessary. And it's also one of the, the things that they're looking at in science now is to try and take the purge out of ayahuasca, which I think is a big mistake. But the idea really is, the idea is the purge. The psychedelic aspect of it is almost like secondary in some regards. And the mentality, which is actually quite beautiful once you get over the hump of throwing up, vomit and all that. But it's the mentality is the capability to take out of you that which no longer serves you. This is a gift from the plants. The ability is like, okay, you've got something in you. It's toxic. It's killing you. We're talking, like toxic emotions, toxic hatred, resentments, and stuff like that. The memories which no longer serve you, sort of, framings which are just completely skewed. Take it out of you. Like, would you, if you, for anything that's kind of bothering you in your past or your upbringing or whatever like that, if you, and this is the question I sort of ask myself and also relate to people on my channel, like, if you could put yourself through 4 hours of hell to solve a problem, is that not worth doing? Like, yeah, ayahuasca looks rough. It is rough. Yes, yes, you can shit your pants. Yes, it can leave you like very bodily discomfort. But is that a price worth paying? And I would say, I mean, for me and some of the things I was going through, I was like, yeah, I will put myself through hell for 4 hours if that means that I can get over some of the problems of my childhood. And then what you tend to find is that it actually opens a can of worms, and there's lots more problems that you realise you're actually in a stack of things that you need to work through. But you start ticking them off the list. But it's, yeah, I don't know, maybe I've just been sort of drinking the sauce a bit too long, but I think ayahuasca is something absolutely, spectacular. But it's certainly not my go-to sort of like fun thing. Sure. But it's as a way of, just as for that healing label, I think there's nothing else like it.
That's really fascinating. Yeah, it's on my bucket list for sure. My vomit bucket list. And
that's a very specific bucket list.
Yeah. So I was perusing through your channel in the last few days, and I saw that you some of your oldest videos are ayahuasca retreat reviews, good and bad, which is very helpful information for people. And so was that around the time that you first started taking ayahuasca, or had you been doing it by then? Like 2019?
I think I'd already done it. I'd done it a few times by then. So yeah, I'd done ayahuasca before I started the channel. But the channel really started after I first went to Peru. So by that point, I'd already done 2 different ayahuasca retreats, but here in Europe, and it wasn't clicking for me at all. I went to one place, which was one of the places where I've given quite a scathing review of. It was not good at all. In fact, I've really got a problem with this organisation. It's very cowboy-y. But I ended up going there, and it ties quite nicely back into what we were saying before about the kind of like the grifters online. This was a place that clearly doing massive ad campaigns. So when I first looked for ayahuasca in Europe, this is the place that popped up. So they're putting much more into the marketing than they are the actual events themselves. But I ended up going there, had an experience, and there was enough to say, okay, there's something there, but it wasn't quite what I'd heard about. It wasn't matching, what I'd heard about ayahuasca. So I was like, okay, I'm not completely turned off this, but this place isn't it. I had some friends who had like a sort of a covert underground kind of ceremony. Went there. That was actually a much nicer ceremony. Had like this kind of like the spiritual vibe was much better, but still the medicine just wasn't kind of connecting for me. So I just thought, do you know what? Before I completely give up on this, I will do it, in its native setting. And I'd always wanted to go to Peru anyway. I'd always wanted to see things like Machu Picchu and see the Amazon. So even if I'd taken ayahuasca out of the equation, I would have still gone to Peru. But I thought, right, okay, I'll, combine a few things off my bucket list here. I'll go to South America, I'll see the jungle, I'll see the Sacred Valley, and I'll try this ayahuasca. And when I got to this retreat center, which was, I was very lucky in that I picked a superb retreat center, one that I still go back to, and in fact one I'm going back to in August. And it was just a really good vibe. The shamans were just really approachable, the setup was great, the location was lovely, and I just had an incredibly powerful experience which completely shook me to my core. And during that retreat, I was just kind of doing what anybody else was. I was taking photos and videos and stuff, and I had no idea what I was going to do with any of this stuff. But one thing that came through to me on this retreat was that if you're going to sort of start taking out things from your life which no longer serve you, or if you, I think one of mine at the time was like I was just mindlessly playing a lot of video games. Like that was my default thing. Like if I'm not doing anything, then I'm just playing video games, even if I wasn't enjoying it anymore. I would just sit there just really mindlessly. And I thought, right, okay, this is, I enjoy video games. I like video games, so I want them to be something that I enjoy. So therefore I need to cut down what I'm doing here. But then what do I fill the time with? What's my new default? And I thought, well, and the kind of suggestion to me was do something creative. And I'd studied film studies at college. So I was like familiar with like video editing and stuff like that. And then I was looking at my phone, and I've got all this footage and all these things. And I thought, right, well, what can I do here? I didn't quite feel comfortable enough to talk about my experiences with the substance at that time. I felt like there was already a lot of people doing trip reports and stuff like that. But I thought, what I can do with my kind of no bullshit mentality is talk more or less objectively, or as objectively as possible, about what I think of this place. Like, is this a good, I by that point I'd been to a good place, a bad place, and a kind of an okay place. And I thought, right, maybe this would be good to, so that when people search one of these places, they know, oh, well, this is good, and here's like the footage, and I know what it's like, and now I know how much it costs, and now I know what kind of vibe it is, because some of these places are kind of like very, a bit more kind of hipstery, and some places are very much more kind of like, no, you all need to sit in silence, and you all need to do this, and some other places, like I said, just don't give a fuck, and just, just like the Wild West. And so I thought it might be useful for someone like me, who tends to like research everything to the nth degree, to be able to come and say, okay, yeah, this place, this is worth the money, and these are the people, and they were great, and stuff like that. So that's where I initially saw my channel doing, was kind of really just talking about, very sort of factual, travel guidey stuff. This is how you get to Peru. This is, these are the best sort of, places to stay. These are the best kind of retreats. Here's what I liked about this. But then over time, as I was sitting more with these experiences, then that kind of storytelling aspect came through, and I kind of realized that I wanted to try and really for myself. I mean, a lot of my content really is for myself, which sounds quite selfish, but I think that's probably, for me anyway, that's the best way to make something that I want, rather than something I think the algorithm wants. And so yeah, I started. I put like a few trip reports together of my experiences, and a lot of them were kind of based on my ayahuasca experiences. But then, a lot of just my other kind of like psychonautica experiences came through, and I just kind of wanted to sort of not only tell my story, but try and encourage that within others, because I see that as part of this kind of, this integration thing, because otherwise, you can end up stuck of like, well, I've just had this absolutely mind-bending experience and I don't know what to do with it. And I said, well, my advice is, well, what does it mean? Tell yourself the story, and the camera is my sort of, notepad for telling others. And sometimes as I write the scripts for these things, then it really is like integrating it in real time. I'm like, I'm writing, and oh, right, yeah, that's actually what it meant to me. And as I, and I've no doubt that even as I'm doing this, some of the details are actually being rewritten on the fly and stuff like that. But that's, at the end of it, I've got like a cohesive story, and I actually, said a little bit then, but I actually enjoy going back watching a lot of my old trip reports and stuff, because it's like, oh right, yeah, that's how I felt at that time. And coming back to what you said at the beginning about spirituality as a state of being, which we're not always in, but sometimes it's nice to be able to revisit that place where you planted that flag and like remember, like, oh right, yeah, it's maybe things aren't great right now, but it is possible. That's I was there. I remember that now, and so being able to revisit some of that stuff is really helpful for me.
Yeah, I find the same thing, man. When I do my trip reports, I find that it's reinforcing my sense of self and that narrative that you tell yourself. And as far as, is it selfish to do what you want to do? There's Rick Rubin's been going around with his book, the Creative Act, I think it's called. One of the things that he said that stuck out to me was the best thing you can do for your audience is actually to create for yourself. So it's like on the surface, it might sound selfish, but it's like because you have that excitement and belief and passion behind it, then you're actually serving the people who are going to watch it in the end. So
I think particularly with somebody like Rick Rubin, again, huge fan of it. Like, that was a lot of the stuff he worked on that defined my sort of teenage years, from like Slayer and the Beastie Boys and stuff like that. And it's that kind of putting something out there which it might not land with the the entire sort of like mainstream audience, but the people it will land with will tend to sort of really like it, and then you've got a chance of that then sort of crossing over into the mainstream, which I think is what happened with things like Beastie Boy and stuff. But I mean, that mentality I think is, and I think particularly in the creative space, it's very easy to fall into that thing of just making something for the sake of making something, or making something because you want it to go viral or something like that. And I've seen people like burn themselves out doing stuff like that, and I've sort of like really tried to avoid like unless it's something that I felt really passionate about. And I've had you get the usual like dickheads writing in the comments like, oh yeah, this video's not got as many views. It's like, yeah, I could absolutely make videos about. I mean, all my highest view videos tend to be about how to vape DMT. And if I wanted to, then I could just make them, and I'm sure my channel could be like 10 times larger. But that's, I'm happy to have provided that service to people who didn't know how to do it. But I'm also one videos that I'm worked on recently, and also one I'm working on at the moment is all this stuff around this DMT laser and stuff like that. And it's kind of, it's just a little fascinating sort of offshoot. I'd always rather do the thing that's interesting to me rather than just become some soulless dude like in front of the computer, because it's a hobby to me, so it's got to be enjoyable.
Sure, yeah, and you don't want to be pigeonholed either into being like the DMT how-to guy.
Yeah, well, it's funny we sort of veered onto that, because it's something. I mean, we were, there's been some stuff in the group where we've been chatting about this, about people being like demonetized and stuff like that. And my channel got demonetized like over a year ago, and there's really no doubt in my mind it's probably because of that sort of stuff. I mentioned a lot of like how to vape, and YouTube's got stuff even with like vaping nicotine and stuff like that. So, and I've kind of been thinking now. I think I'm at a point in my sort of like YouTube life where I'm thinking, okay, what do I do here? Like, it's not so much about the making money off it or something like that, but it's more like, I don't know. I was just thinking about maybe sort of like removing some of that content, and maybe even moving it to like another channel. I even came up with a little bit of branding for it. So I've got kind of like Adeptus Psychonautica and the Adeptus Psychonauti with all the sort of all the
that's great,
all the sort of like the vaping videos, because people seem to get value from it. But yeah, I kind of, I'm wondering whether like a lot of what I consider to be good content is getting sort of lost in the algorithm somewhere, and I don't know. I'm still musing on that, but I'm kind of wondering whether it's time to do a little bit of a relaunch, and that was kind of some of the mentality behind doing the panel stuff as well, just to have a different stream of content, which I think is separate enough. This very long form content, which is separate enough from my kind of shorter video essays, full of swearing and silly images and stuff like that.
Yeah. Dang. So you did get demonetized. Didn't it get reinstated?
Very briefly,
Okay.
yeah. So I think I got demonetized. I think it was December 22 or something like that. When it came to the thing where I could reapply, I just clicked the button. I didn't do anything. It got remonetized, and then the next time I uploaded a video, it got demonetized. And the video I uploaded wasn't anything rough. I think it was psyching around. So that kind of made me think, okay, do I want to? Yeah, just what I want to do. I've still not decided yet.
Yeah.
Because I can't deny that a lot of those how-to videos have put eyes on my channel, which I'm sort of grateful for, and that and then maybe that's converted people into watching some of the other content. So I don't want to get too precious over it, but I don't know. Like I say, that's still a work in progress.
Yeah. And that's what's good about having the Discord, right? Because there's a lot of like really handy stuff. Like Josie's come up with this whole like index of keywords that you want to like ban, because there's also a really big like problem with the spammers and scammers. That's like one of my pastimes now. It's just deleting comments.
Yeah, it's nuts, and they're getting very advanced. Have you seen the ones where they start having a conversation with themselves,
Yes.
like a fairly innocuous conversation, and then it builds up to, because it used to be it was always just like a link, but now it's very elaborate, and I'm kind of like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what kind of resource or logistics goes into creating all these accounts. I mean, I'm guessing it's automated to some very high degree, but still, just what a complete like waste of time. But I'm guessing there must be. I mean, with all these things, it only takes a few people to actually click on it or be the customers, and I guess it pays for itself. But
Exactly. Yeah.
got it. Yeah, it is. I'm probably do the same as you. Like I go in, I check the stuff that's been held for review, delete, sort of. It's because it just takes up noise in the channel. It stops you getting a feel for what people are actually talking about.
Right. Yeah. And I worry about that one person who may be a little more naive, or like maybe it's like a younger person, or even someone who's like 68 years old and they don't know how the internet works. For those of us who have been online a little bit longer, we can smell it. We're like, oh, you just won $1 million. I remember on the internet in like 2006 or whatever, you would get a pop-up ad that would be like, you just won $1 million, and it's like, yeah. So you gotta be looking out for that. So yeah, I wanted to go back a little bit to the ayahuasca thing, because that was one of the things that made me want to talk to you. Is that I have a huge fascination with the Shipibo people and their use of the Icaros, the music, and how they can be intentional with that, and apparently they know like what song is going to create what visual, and the whole visual system is almost like a form of sheet music that they embed the song. And like, I'm a musician, so I find that all super, super fascinating, and almost like some kind of shamanic superpower of sorts. So I wanted to just like hear some of your experience in working with the Shipibo, and specifically like Icaros, and if you had any catalyzed experiences from the music.
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, so when I went to Peru for the first time, and I kind of, without really knowing much about it, that was the tradition within the retreat center I ended up at with was the Shipibo. I ended up at the center I ended up at because I'd heard about Icaros. I'd heard about these medicine songs, these healing songs, and I was doing some experimentation at home before I went. I was trying, kind of what's referred to like farmahuasca or anahuasca, like a sort of a homemade analog version, and so I was looking for some music to listen to, and I found this playlist of traditional Shipibo Icaros. So I put it on, and holy shit! I mean, this was it was just like game changing. To call it music, I'm not sure is accurate. But then I was like, okay, wherever this guy is, this particular guy, I need to go there. So I found out who this was. It was a shaman called Wheeler. He was at this center, what at the time was called Pulse. And so that's where I was going, and that was the end of that. As I say, it turns out the center was absolutely awesome as well, but I was like, I just got to be where this Wheeler guy is. Got there, ended up sort of becoming quite friendly with Wheeler. He was just very approachable guy. His own stories are just absolutely fascinating. Got a very unique appearance because he's kind of, one of his eyes is completely white. He had an accident with a fishing hook through his eye, and that's how he became a shaman, because he was trying to heal his vision. And so he ended up working with ayahuasca, and then through that process kind of like gained a new kind of vision. Wow. So and sort of found his voice as a shaman. But it was, yeah, and so I, through talking with Wheelan and the other shamans, just suddenly, got really fascinated by this kind of Shipibo culture of, basically they, for them, the kind of, the spirits that, every plant has a spirit, and this is it's just the way it is. There's nothing really mystical about this to them. It's like, it's as obvious to us as if we said, some kind of plants have aspirin in them and some of them have, opium in them and stuff like that. They say everything's got a spirit in it, and that by ingesting these plants, you can commune with these spirits. And they apply this across pretty much everything. So not just the psychedelic and psychoactive ones, but they do a lot of what's called dieting plants, whereby you ingest certain plants. And if you do this enough of, certain quantities over a certain period of time, then you will develop a relationship with these plants. You're basically taking the spirit into you, and that spirit will guide you. And it's that gives you the Icaros. So the Icaros don't necessarily come from the psychedelic experience. The Icaros come from dieting the plants, which can then be used within the ayahuasca experience. And an Icaro is whenever you, it comes in like sort of various forms. So when you're in the psychedelic state, you see these very distinctive patterns, and that is the Icaro. But that's pattern in itself is kind of being sung into existence by the shaman, and to the shaman, the pattern itself, as you mentioned, is also the kind of the sheet music. And I've got a video of this, and I'll send it to you after we get off here. Please. But I've a shaman, like a female shaman, a maestra, and basically, reading one of these patterns as a piece of sheet music, and sort of like going. And what looks to us just like a very beautiful piece of geometry is, basically a transcendent song in a psychedelic language. So they're not singing in sort of Spanish, or it's a lot of these things. There's not a kind of a translation for some of it. There is, but some of it is just this psychedelic language, a language for communing with the experience itself. So you've got this kind of almost like feedback loop of, psychoactive experience, creating a space for these Icaros to appear. The Icaros come to the shaman from the various plants that they consume. So the more plants they diet, then the more Icaros they, I guess, like know or learn. And a lot of these shamans will say that they do not consciously sing these Icaros. They are just like a conduit. They just open their mouth and it just kind of comes out. And so each shaman's Icaros will be slightly unique. So these aren't things that they're learning from a songbook. It's the Icaro comes to them because they've dieted the plant. The outcome of the diet is that you will then have an Icaro. So that's kind of, one of the things of, as you work with different shamans, you hear these like incredibly beautiful and complex songs, and then when you're in that state, and then as they sing them, then the patterns will appear. And I've been in states where these things are just streaming out of the ceiling and just completely encapsulating you. Sometimes feel like they're going into like every orifice and just working on you. And that's the kind of that's how what they would describe it is the healing aspect of the Icaros. So they call forth like the Icaros, invoking the sort of spirits, and that's what sort of works upon you and sort of takes stuff out of you and sort of heals you. And, just hearing this and looking at this, and again, with my kind of like skeptical point of view, but then having experienced it, it's just one of the most beautiful sort of cultural ideas I think is possible. This idea of people who, they absolutely believe in this stuff, and whether we do or not is an entirely sort of different subject, but they completely believe in this stuff. It seems completely cohesive with the environment that they're in. They're in this jungle environment. They rely heavily on these plants for every single form of medication. They constantly say that the jungle is our pharmacy. This is where you hurt, you go to the jungle. You need food, you go to the jungle. You need, something to help you psychologically, you go to it. All from the jungle. And they've developed this, not only this culture of reverence, but a method of communicating with it, with the experience. And then they would come and they will share that with you. And I've, sat there, as someone like, a typical Westerner with my head up my arse and, all the kind of usual like first world problems and, well, and also some very human problems, dealing with like grief and trauma and sort of, stuff in my childhood or whatever. And to have someone who doesn't really know me from anyone, but yet, and I'm in this kind of hyper vulnerable state of this very deep psychedelic experience, and they come and they come and sit in front of you and they sing for your well-being. They sing to heal you, and it's extraordinary. It's and as they sing, you are visualizing these things. They're blowing smoke on you. They're doing all this stuff which might be perceived as completely woo, but they're doing it for your well-being. And I just don't really see the kind of like any kind of parallels to that in the Western world. This kind of, I think the closest thing is like someone saying, "Oh, I'll pray for you," Mm-hmm. But still, this idea of like, I'm not just going to pray for you. I'm going to sit here for 3 hours and sing my fucking heart out to the heavens and ask the plants, ask the sacred sort of Mother Earth to come and help you be a better human being. I've shed many a tear just in awe of it, and it's, I don't know, it just seems to me as just such a beautiful binding community way of doing things, to come together as a group like that, and to just honor the transcendent, but also have it, have some kind of benefit to you as well. And I think that's why something like ayahuasca is so spiritual, because you really realize that you're having the kind of the psychedelic experience, but you realize it's just completely connected to you. It's completely connected to your body. You are part of this. And I always, I had the realization that I think ayahuasca is more of like an event rather than like a trip. It feels like it's, when you're there, it feels like it's something it's very timeless. It's always existed. You feel like you're walking into a space that is there waiting for you, and it's you get a lot of the same kind of sort of similar things to the DMT experience, because obviously there is DMT in ayahuasca, of the kind of like it's very welcome back, and it's very you feel like you're in a place that's just been waiting, not just for you but for all your ancestors, all your lineage of all time, which again gives it this very strong sort of ancestral sense, because you just feel completely connected. And I've sat in quite a few different traditions now, and for me the Shipibo one is just hands down the most beautiful one. Or maybe it's just because it's the first one where I had that experience, so maybe I'm somewhat biased to it, but still it's incredible. Also, I think it would be fair to say that it does lend that extra kind of mystical vibe to it, just because it is something I cannot understand, which would be completely different to, say, something like if they were singing in Spanish, or if they're singing in English or something like that. So it really, passes out the kind of like, you know, it's not something where you're kind of like you're focusing on the words or something like that. You're just in it, and you're in this experience. And particularly like some of the places that I've been to, it's not just one shaman. You might have multiple shamans. So I've been in one place where there was 5 of them singing at the same time. And it is bonkers because they're all singing different songs, but they all kind of like, they kind of harmonize and do this kind of like call repeat. So one of them might go ba 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 ba, and the other one like da da da, and so just within the visions, you're just seeing these kind of different sort of forces and these different like Icaros, these different geometries come into play. And I mean, it can be completely overwhelming as well. You just sometimes you just feel battered by like, oh my God, it's just this cacophony of divine noise. And it kind of reminds me a lot of you know, some of the kind of like the biblical stories of when, you know, people were confronted by sort of angelic beings, and you know, you're just hearing like the trumpets of heaven, and it just kind of makes you like, the only response is to drop to your knees and just shit yourself, and just you know, because the human body was just not meant to take that level of the divine. There is an element of that in this. You're just like being bombarded with these amazingly beautiful songs, but it's like sometimes it's like, well, too much. It's just too much. But it is too much because they are trying to cultivate a certain response in you. They're trying to get you to throw up, to sort of like, you know, overload your system, get it out of you. And then it seems like they always know that once it's kind of out, it just breaks, and it just, you know, the wave just breaks, and they just bring the kind of like the temperature of the ceremony right down, and then it's just absolutely divine. And at the end of it, you know, people are just sat there like, you know, I had you know, the last time I was in Peru, and I kind of mentioned to them that, you know, this is probably my 7th or something time back there, and they're like, well, why do you keep coming back? And then like after the first ceremony, I just went to go, yeah, now you know why I keep coming back, because like people's jaw are just on the floor. They're like, what the fucking hell? And it, as like a content creator, which I have to try and turn off a bit when I'm at these places, because you sort of gut reaction is, Jesus Christ, like, we've got to film this, we've got to record this. This is like, and but it's just not. I mean, obviously it's not recordable because a lot of what's happening is happening within your mind, but you don't kind of, you know, when you're off your tits, you don't really recognize that moment. But it's impossible to kind of like put into words of the magnitude of what is happening within these rooms. It's incredible. And dude, I would say, it definitely put it on your bucket. I think you would absolutely love it. It was a complete game changer for me.
Yeah. Oh, I'm buying my ticket right now, man. That sounds, you sold me. So I have 2 questions. So one is, did you see a similar pattern to what they illustrate in their clothing and stuff like that? Like when you heard the Icaros, did you see something like that, or was it kind of different, vaguely similar?
No, it's very recognizable as that, but I didn't know it was that until I knew it was that. So again, it's kind of coming back to the love spiritual thing. So, you know, you see these people and you see these patterns and stuff like that, and I just thought this was like Shipibo art or Peruvian art or something like that. And then when I was in the experience, and suddenly these, like I say, these things just started like pouring out of the ceiling, and it's not just a kind of it's like the pattern is what they would refer to as the spirit. So these things are, you know, alive, very much in like the, you know, the Terence McKenna sort of description of, you know, the hyperspace temple also being sentient and stuff. It's the same kind of principle here. So you've got these patterns that are appearing and have a somewhat of a sentience to them, a kind of an alien sentience to them, but it's not inanimate. And at that point, it was this kind of like, oh yeah, I get it now. I understand what is happening now. The pattern is the song, is the experience, is the healing. Like it just kind of clicks, and I say it can click in a sort of an almost overwhelming sense. You're like, oh God, this is like, you know. Then you're like, what does this mean? Like, what am I even talking about? Like, you know, am I the subject or the object? Like, what the fuck's going going on here? But then, yeah, it's so I don't, in that regard, I wouldn't completely discount it, but I don't think I was primed for it. I wasn't like primed to make that connection. Although you could argue that I was primed just because I'd seen the designs, but I didn't realize that the designs were supposed to be the music was supposed to be that came later on. But yeah, I mean, I was kind of astounded at the almost like the sort of spiritual technology involved of being able to sing this thing into a visionary manifestation, and it's not mushy at all. It's crystal clear, and it's like instantly recognizable. And again, as each song is its own Icaros, so it's a different different designs come in as different songs come in, and so yeah, I mean it's just kind of something I've just come to accept as that's what it is. And I think you could put a spin on it as like it's it's just a kind of it's a sound input, it's an audio input, and that's what's making this. If you listen to like a sine wave or some binaural beats or something like that, then I've no doubt those will generate different kinds of imagery.
Right.
But the way it's kind of linked together and linked with this kind of healing experience, it just seems like they're onto something.
Yeah.
And if you believe that sort of like different sounds can invoke different emotions, which I don't think is controversial, or that different sounds can sort of invoke certain brainwave states and things like that, then I think this is the kind of the application of that fully into the psychedelic realm. Like, it's like these are the sounds and the notations to be able to steer the psychedelic experience in this very specific way. And yeah, I mean, it seems I think this is one of the most impressive things about the Shipibo. This is what they do. They are like they're like masters of psychedelic technology.
Yeah. That's what's so fascinating about it to me, man. Like, this is probably one of the most fascinating areas of the psychedelic universe that I've yet to experience for myself. But every time I hear about it, I'm just like, man, that sounds like they've developed exactly what you're saying, like a kind of shamanic psychedelic technology. And I think that we're capable of exploring that even further, especially when it comes to sound and versions of language. My other question having to do with this is, there's obviously this power in creating this ritualistic container, right? So, and the music. So, holding those two concepts in our minds, the ritualistic container and the Icaros and spiritual technology, do you see any way that we might be able to bring that into our culture without just like extracting it and trying to copy it exactly? Like, could you imagine some way to do that outside?
Yeah, and I think it's already been done in some regards by, I mean, there's certainly other kinds of groups even that use ayahuasca. So there's kind of churches, ayahuasca churches are called Santa Daime and what's the other one? Union de Evangelisto, I think it's called. These are, I think, more in sort of Brazil than in Peru. And they've got, but theirs is much more rooted in almost like Catholicism. So and they have their own structures around, and it's a lot around. It's got, I'll say, a lot of the same kind of plant worship in, but also relating it a lot to much more mainstream religious stuff. And it seems to work well for them. Now, again, that's not going to gel with everybody. So it's, obviously South America's got quite a lot of Catholic stuff, so it makes sense why it's there. So I think the question of what would be the Western version of this? And I've kind of pondered this a bit myself, and certainly I think there is. I think if we just try and mass import the South American thing, that's going to feel somewhat fake. But I think there's some of our music which I think would actually lend itself quite well to these to sort of being sung in ceremony. In fact, I've been in ceremonies where this is kind of happening, and just some of the songs off the top of my head are things like like the song like Hallelujah, or songs. A lot of the songs that come from where I'm from in Manchester, there's a lot of what we kind of refer to as like urban hymns. So this is very like fairly modern music, but like with a lot of kind of meaning to it, and sort of it's a lot more relevant to sort of our Western experience. So I think I do think it's possible. I was actually at a place back at the beginning of 2023, which was a much more, I would say it was a bit of a fusion. It was kind of a fusion of some of the stuff from South America, but also it was happening in a much more like Western setting. So this was taking place in like a villa, so it wasn't done in like a sort of like a jungle temple-y kind of thing. It was using songs from like being played off a playlist, but with someone kind of singing over the top of it and interacting over the top of it. And when I got to that, I was skeptical, thinking, oh god, this is going to be a bit cringe. But and some of it was a bit cringe, but some of it really landed with me, and that actually put a slightly different framing even on some of my experiences in South America. Because one thing that I think is something that I have to try and like keep in balance with all my gushings about South America, and that is one of the things I just mentioned, that it's in this different language, which gives it this kind of mystical quality, that also can give it this distance, because particularly when you come back, come back from South America, now you are like a million miles away from that experience, and that experience might have been completely life-changing, transcendent within that setting, but now you've got to find a way for it to work in your Western setting, and you kind of like, and I've seen people struggle with this, where it's like, yeah, it made sense over there, but now I'm back here and my life's falling apart again. So I think what we kind of need, and where this fusion kind of retreat worked well, is that it wasn't quite as abstract, in that there was there was the singing and the sort of the connecting to the soul, and there was sort of a lot of that same spiritual work was at play, but it didn't have, because like the shaman there, or the facilitator there, was more Western, and it was kind of, there was it was more being led in English, and it was the kind of the feel in between the ceremonies, it just felt like a lot easier to communicate in between and sort of share things. I think that might be something more where we need to get to, is something where, I don't know, where it's not quite as alien to your average person. No, I think to people like you and me, that alienness is almost like what's attractive about it, to just jump completely balls deep into the deep end of like that kind of spiritual, void, and being this completely alien surrounding is perfect. But for some people, that might be, in fact, I would go as far as say, probably for the majority of people, it might be a step too far, and I think they might be better served with somebody who can be hands-on. Because another aspect of this, with working with these shamans in South America, is that there is a language barrier. There is a and they will talk to you. Like I said, I end up getting friendly with quite a few of these guys, but it was being done through my sort of like pseudo Spanish and a translator, and often for a lot of these guys, Spanish is also their second language. Their primary language is Shipibo. So but you kind of you muddle through it, and it's you a lot more on feelings and instinct. But still, for someone who's really going through some shit, then it might be more useful to have someone who can, for that to happen in a Western setting. And that what was good about this retreat was at pretty much almost a year ago today. So yeah, I think it is possible to do it. I think it's possible using a lot of the same techniques of music that that connects. You know, a lot of these like the non-Shipibo ceremonies will be done with, you know, people playing guitar and Spanish songs and stuff. I've even been at ceremonies where people play like harps in the like in pitch black room. People are going, it sounds like heaven. So I think the key soul uplifting elements are transferable, and I think as they become transferable, then, and if we practice them enough within our kind of Western setting, then I think we can start to develop our own spiritual technology, which I don't think, you know, is not necessarily in competition, but is something that we can, like that can be our own. And again, it's one of those things. It's almost like, you know, back to what I was saying about the panel thing. I don't know. Does somebody need to kickstart that to make it? And this is where I've kind of joked a lot on my channel. Like, you know, somebody needs to start like a DMT cult. I mean, like, but a friendly cult, a nice cult, and it really will need someone to do it. But then it's making sure it's the right person to do it, and but somebody needs to put that idea forward, because one of my concerns with a lot of what's happening at the moment, particularly with a lot like the stuff that's happening around like legalization, things like that. And I'm you know, I don't want anyone to be criminalized for any of this stuff, but I am somewhat wary of the just kind of like blanket go online and order DMT pens. It seems very undisciplined. I get messages from people having some like very disturbing experiences, people doing it in ways that I would consider somewhat reckless. So yeah, I think that's the big shift I would like to see, is like, okay, if we're going there as a society, if we're going all in, then like there needs to be some kind of structure available. It doesn't mean that everyone has to conform to the structure. You know, people like you and me, we're going to do what we want to do anyway. But I think it's better to have some kind of structure there, so that for the people who recognize that they need that structure, that they don't just become collateral damage to an influx of mind-bending drugs into a society that's not ready to cope with it.
Yeah, that's all very fair. So when were you doing the DMT cult?
I don't know. It's one of the things we said, like, but do you know what? It ties back quite nicely into something that I think was on our very first panel, where Jake was talking about having the sort of like the DMT's summer camp kind of thing.
Yes.
And I mean, I know I was like listening to him, like, the lad's got a point here, like this, and it's, I think, something like that. I mean, this is something I've toyed with, particularly because I'm getting to a later point in my life, and I'm kind of thinking, okay, what does without trying to sound like too old, like, what do things look like when I'm retired? What do I want to do? Once I'm not working and once I'm not a father or got little kids anymore. And I've been to a few places. One that really did something for me. There was a retreat that I went on where it was very much, so not a typical retreat centre at all. It was more like a park, like almost like a kids' play park, but without the kids' stuff. But it was somebody had bought this land and kitted this place out basically as a place for tripping. It had all this, a lot of like Jungian stuff, like sort of sand pits and pebbles and stuff like that. A lot of like yin yang stuff. A lot of just places to sit. Lots of like tarot cards, spinners and stuff like that. Nice. Lots of different sort of iconography of gods and goddesses and stuff like that. And you go there. This was a San Pedro retreat I was on, and you go there. You drink San Pedro, and you just got to spend all day. It was completely private, so nobody else walked in. So that you just got this group of adults tripping in this thing. Infrastructure-wise, very low. You just need to buy the land and put the stuff in. But now you've got a place for adults to come together and have this kind of community experience. And they had like a marquee where you could go and get some food and stuff like that. And there were some bathrooms, but that was about it. And I just thought, what a fucking brilliant idea! Like a place for adults to come together and explore their own sovereign minds. And because it was, there wasn't this big retreat centre there, the cost was quite low. It was basically, you're paying the running costs of bringing some food and having the sort of the medicine. And that's where I was kind of thinking, okay, if we're going to have this kind of like psychedelic, revolution kind of thing, this would be a very good low barrier to entry, because there's no doubt about it. Retreat centres cost money. They're costing more and more, and travelling to South America is not cheap. Yeah. But this just having a space where you go, and people were like camping out on the space, so we'd have the space for like a weekend. We'd camp out there, having these very powerful experiences, and very budget friendly, and a very good sense of community. And then we sort of go back and do the same thing every year. And so that would be one way, I think, of doing it. It did have the feel of Jake's summer camp. And so my kind of thought was, if people did that, rather than focusing on this big business model of build retreat centres and stuff like that, but just creating spaces where psychonauts can go, and you could have certain events, like you could have like solstice events and stuff where you're all there. And then, or you could have fairly low key events, which is just like a psychonaut picnic or something like that. And that seemed to me like a good way to give a bit of structure to this kind of movement, give a sense of community to it. The park's always there. On certain days that these are the events that are happening there, and then you could end up having like a full 6 week summer camp, deep sort of dive sort of thing. So I don't know. I mean, that's something that's been like floating on my mind. It's like, okay, this seems like something that could be done fairly inexpensively. And then it's just kind of where's the best place to do something like that? Am I the person to run something like that? Don't know. I mean, that's the kind of the ideas, Mono. But my thought was, with something like that, if we could do that kind of, if like many people did that kind of model, and it was something similar to the model used by like motorcycle gangs, whereby you've got different chapters, each one's kind of like self-governing, but they're all adhering to a certain code. So like Hell's Angels do or something like that, and where there's, so each chapter's got its own kind of like, its own piece of land, its own meeting spot. But then sometimes these chapters all come together for like mega events, and then sometimes, everybody comes together for the super mega event. And I think there's something like this already going on. I think an example of one of the mega events would be something like Burning Man. And then sort of like a more local event would be something like, like what happens at sort of, I know, Alex Gray's Cosm Chapel of Sacred Mirrors, where he has like solstice tripping sort of events. So you've got this local, you've got a local physical focal point with some kind of event that happens there to give that sort of sense of community and consistency, and then the possibility of combining the things together into some sort of mega event. I think that model will work, and it just requires people to get off their asses and make the local thing, which is no easy feat.
Yeah, plus there's still a legal barrier to a lot of that. I don't know how legal this place is that you're talking about, but
I think it gets away on the plausible deniability of it's not advertising itself as like, hey, this come here on a Saturday and this place is going to be full of people absolutely shit faced. So it's really just a park of consciousness, you could call it, and I think that's a similar kind of thing with what Alex Ray's doing. I don't think he doesn't really advertise. It's an artist's kind of residence place, but we all know what they're doing there, So I think that's the way to get around that sort of thing. But I honestly think it's just a matter of time before that legality thing is kind of solving itself, and it's solving itself in a lot of places anyway. And this is why I think there is a need to do this, because I think better to have that kind of structure in place so that when it solves itself, people can fall into something. And from what I've just described, there's no dogma there. There's no, you don't have to go and worship Wachuma or Mother Ayahuasca or anything, but you can do if you want to. It was just all these people. It was just all these people from different beliefs sort of coming together and just exploring consciousness. I think that's the way to do it, rather than just it happening in this kind of haphazardy way, right, which I'm not quite. Yeah, like I said, it makes me a little bit anxious.
Yeah, nice. And I like the idea of there just being variety in the scale, because just to mix it up. And I know a lot of psychonauts are solitary creatures and want to take experiences solo, maybe with a small group, maybe with a bigger group. I have a friend who she's just real extroverted social butterfly, and she always wants to like trip with the big group, and I'm kind of like, like I'll trip with you, but like, I don't want to do it with like 9 people, half of who I don't really know. Like it could go okay. I could end up bonding with them, but
I can empathize that, because that was actually one of the things when I did go to. I was pretty much like you. I was like, yeah, if I'm tripping, I want it to be like me or somebody I completely trust. Mm-hmm. I don't want to be in like a bunch of like random strangers. I was very introverted. Mm-hmm. At one time, and that was kind of part of the challenge of like, what, I'm going to go and sit in a room with like 20 people listening to them throw up, like, this sounds like absolute hell. But I just thought, okay, come on, Rob, just try it and just get over it. And and I'm glad I did, because it's, first of all, it opened me up to meeting people that I want to meet. So for sure, if you're kind of introverted, you get that comfort of, control and, not having to interact with people you don't want to. But you miss out on a lot of the novelty of just finding some really like beautiful people. Mm-hmm. But also it taught me a lot about like empathy and compassion. And I think, again, it's one of the things that people recoil against a lot with something like ayahuasca. Like, I don't want to be hearing some chick screaming in the corner and some guy crying, and throwing up into his bucket. But when you're hearing it, you really feel like compassion. You can hear someone struggling, and you're like, you send your prayers to them, you send your hearts, and like, because it's either already been you or it's going to be you, right. And it was just sort of like a real learning for me, like to be able to not just go, I wish this guy'd shut the fuck up, which I still get from time to time, but to still like, you go, dude, you're doing the work, like get it out of you, like fucking, and you do get locked into this kind of synchronicity, and one person starts to throw up, and then it brings that emotion up in you, and it comes out. So I think there's like I say, there's a benefit to having multiple approaches. Right. I don't think one is better than the other. I think there is absolutely a place for solo experiences. I would, I certainly don't fall into this sort of category of people who would say like, if you do psychedelics without a shaman, you're just, you're risking Satan eating your soul or whatever. But I certainly don't fall into this category of people saying, like, why would I want to do this? So that, like, I know what I like, and it's like, well, you don't know what you like until you've kind of done it, and there is a value in that group setting, even with people you don't necessarily know, because one of the things that comes out is the common humanity. Yeah. And that was something, that was a big lesson for me. Like, come on, Rob, just fucking, the universe doesn't revolve around you. Just, feel a bit of empathy for someone fucking going through some difficult shit. And I think that's, it helped me understand myself a lot more. So yeah, I think we need a lot of different tools in the toolbox, but I think the tools need to be sincere sort of tools. Like I don't really like the word authentic, but I think it's the tools need to be coming from the right place rather than just the kind of like any old fucking wacky woo-woo shit goes. But that's something we're gonna have to sort of figure out as a society.
Sure.
I think.
Yeah, no, and I like thinking about this, and I think it's not like we're starting completely from scratch, because like what you're doing is you're scanning the scene for models that work pretty well, and then you can take that and build on it, and twist it to your own. It's just any other form of creativity. Do you feel like there's any kind of cap? Because you mentioned mega events, and I in one of your YouTube videos you talked about there being like 40 people, but it was because a space was too small. Do you think if there was like a bigger space that would be okay, or Yeah, is there any kind of limit to you on how many people it's too much?
I think the limit would be the capability of the space to cope with it. So the one that you're referring to, that was actually the first one I ever attended, and that was the place where they were not equipped for that many people. I think the more people you have, the more kind of facilitators you need, because at a very simple level, if particularly with high doses, something like ayahuasca, people struggle to walk. People might be sick on themselves. People might shit themselves. So you need people to help do that. Now, you don't want to be feeling like you need to go and empty your bowels and there not be anyone to help you because they're helping someone else because there's only 2 people in a room of 40. That's just not going to work. Or, you can't. You need to, maybe you can get to the bathroom yourself, but you've lost your torch. You carry this little red torch and you can't find your way. So you need, sometimes you just need help. So I think as long as that can be covered for, I don't have a problem with it. And I've got friends, I've never been to one of these events myself, but I've got some good friends who go to events in, I think it's in, I don't know, it might be Ecuador or it was another South American country. Where the setup is like 100 plus people, and it's done outside with a couple of big bonfires, and they drink ayahuasca basically all night long. They drink lots of little cups. So it's just, lots of, singing, dancing around the bonfires. It's like a huge, big live music event, like lots of people playing instruments and stuff like that. And they say it's amazing. Surrender, I think that's what it's called. And so a completely different style to what I've described. The ones I'm at kind of tend to be, the ones I kind of favour are more, I think the biggest group is like 20, 25 people. But that's with like 5 facilitators and between 3 and 5 shamans. You feel safe. You feel safe to have that kind of experience. Whereas if you don't, I've even been in some ceremonies where it's just been like 3 of us, so like 3 participants. That is so very intimate, and still with 2 facilitators and a shaman and stuff like that. So I think as long as it's coverable, I wouldn't put like a hard cap on it. I think there's probably a point at which it just hits a natural ceiling, since this is kind of really based around really kind of unamplified music. So then there's just going to be a limit to where it stops being effective. So I don't think you could pack a festival ground and so, because it just, unless you're going to turn it to like a full concert, and I think that loses somewhat of the connection there. So that might be it, but I certainly, based on what my friends say about Surrender, then if there's 100 plus and people, if they can accommodate that, I don't think that's a problem. So I think like a church setting, I think would work. Like a more that kind of typical setup. Right. It's just really about what can be accommodated, and I think that also kind of maps quite well onto some of the westernized stuff of when you see, you have like at places like Burning Man, like tripping tents or chill out tents. People are having like a thing. So, and these might be catering to like 50. Huge big marquee tents, 50, 100 people or whatever, like trying to wind down a little bit, and they've got volunteers on hand to help, and like why not? So I think it'll find its own equilibrium. But I would say, I think it's, as long as it, for me, I think it would be something lost if it went beyond that acoustic-y kind of natural volume levels.
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. So instead of expanding your church into a mega church, Joel Osteen church, just open a new one.
Well, and that also then creates a new sort of sense of community, So again, I think like the mega churches like you have in the US, which are just, quite spectacular to somebody, it's like what is going on here? Like we don't really have that kind of thing in the UK. But I think that maybe that is their Burning Man. Maybe that's their mega. No, I don't know whether that's true. Whether that's what they just do every Sunday is go to the Joel Osteen mega concert. But I think if it was going more off like the original, or certainly how it is in England, like the kind of like, you have a you've got a village or a town, and then you've got like your local parish churches which serve that sort of town. That seems to me like that would work in the psychedelic setting of, you've got, your village or town, and you've got your psychedelic community center, and that has, that meetings are like any other community center, and events there. And then, if you've got a bigger town, you might need one on the other side of town, and then, the town becomes a city, and you might need 4 of them. And so it kind of scales that way. But then the 4 might come together for the mega event, and that's where they hire the local stadium, and it's Joel Osteen all the way. It's like,
yeah, dude, this is totally unrelated to psychedelics, but in Houston is actually where the Joel Osteen Church is, where I live, and they found like tens of thousands of dollars of cash like stuffed in the walls. Did you hear about that?
Right.
Yeah.
No.
So there's
what is like a hiding place for his money, or like...
I never even got the explanation, but that just to know that stuff that sketchy is happening there tells me what I need to know.
I mean the whole religious thing. I mean, again, I only see bits of it from like the kind of outside perspective, but I find it very hard to reconcile with what I see on like sort of on TV, with the sort of like the TV evangelism and places like that. Like I don't see what is spiritual about that at all. I don't see what is serving the community. Again, I might have this talking about. It just seems so fucking predatory to me. It troubles me that like somebody's thinking of like the audience, that somebody's kind of like spiritually misfiring that much that they think that by sending some guy money to go and buy a new plane, that this is somehow serving their spirituality. It makes me wonder, but like this, there's some podcast I was listening to where they were talking about the kind of that we've all kind of really got a some kind of some kind of hole within us, and that hole gets filled in by different sort of cultural artifacts. Now, one of those might be spirituality and church or whatever like that, or it could be some sort of activism, or it could be it could be atheism, or it could be something that's happening inside, like aliens or something like that. But whatever it is, it's the same kind of hole that things are getting plugged into. You think of like it's almost like the socket on Tony Stark's Iron Man suit. So things are getting plugged into it, and whatever gets plugged into it, all this kind of passion and devotion just gets funneled through it. But some of these objects that you're plugging into it are just completely wrong, but they still get the same kind of response from us. And I think that seems to be what I observe when I see that kind of church thing. It's like you've got people who are really looking for a spiritual connection. So I don't blame the audience at all. They're looking for that kind of fulfillment and to sacrifice something, to sacrifice their money for something that they believe is a greater good. And it's just misfiring and being manipulated by these absolute wankers, in my opinion, just sucking them dry, and it breaks my heart. It's and again, to tie back to what we talked about, this is something I see popping up within the psychedelic community. Like there are people preying on this. There's a lot of maybe there's some really great energy workers out there, and maybe there's just some absolute bullshit artists, and there's some people who are like really wanting to share the magic of DMT, and there's some people making really shitty low-grade vape pens and charging exorbitant amounts of money for them, and there's some, back to what I was trying to do, like, there's some really great retreat centres which are worth absolutely every penny, and there's some absolute cowboy shitholes which are just not equipped to deal with like people's trauma and stuff. And this is something we're really going to have to navigate, and particularly in our sort of Western sense, navigate it in a way where we are trying to learn this spiritual technology as we go along. So it's, it almost feels like we're trying to like, change the wings of the plane in mid-air, so yeah, we'll have to see how well we figure that out. But like I said, I think I'm somewhat hopeful, and I think there are components there that can be used. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, it comes to that, we're just gonna have to make this summer camp happen, mate. That's what we need to do.
What needs to happen.
We need to do the Camp David of psychedelic summer camps.
Let's do it.
It doesn't sound that hard to do in principle, does it? You know, I think between us we could probably like bang it together.
Yeah,
but
especially with your organizational prowess. It won't all be on you. We'll do that. We'll help you.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, I'll do the books. We'll let Jake do the weird shit.
Okay, cool.
Jake and Vivek, they can be the masters of ceremony.
Yeah, love it. Nice, man. Well, yeah, I think it shows that the problem isn't with the religion necessarily, like inherently. It's a human nature to
for sure
grab onto power and manipulate.
Yeah. I think religion. I've become a lot softer on religion, sort of in my sort of more recent years, because I kind of recognize it more now as people trying to understand the world and just sort of, you know, and often quite understand it in quite deep metaphysical terms, and I think it's actually a little bit of a disservice to it. This kind of like, it's, you know, it's not true. It's kind of like it's not literally true. It's like, well, yeah, no fucking shit. You know, these, you know, they didn't have the sort of technologies and the stuff that we, you know, the measuring instruments and stuff now. But it's when I look at something like a religious text now, I really just read it more as like, you know, this is someone just trying to understand the nature of reality, and to be honest, not doing a bad job of it, you know, at all, and sort of, you know, creating, you know, like we talked about Jung, like sort of archetypes of, you know, I mean, what is God if not the Father archetype? You know, it's the king of all kings. You know, this is very archetypal. The king, the son, you know, the sacrifice. These are, the pure mother. You know, these are, I think, very things that we get. So I think it's obvious why things like religion has become what it's become. But yeah, also very easy to then, you know, start applying these kind of misfires and rewiring, like little sneaky, shifty rewires and mix up. But I think from the core texts and ideas are, yeah, fucking kudos to them. You know, I mean, I wish I could write the fucking Book of Revelations. It's mental.
That's funny that you mentioned that, because when I was on the latter end of, you know, attending church when I was about 13 or 14 is whenever I started to kind of like, do I really believe this? And so I would just be bored sitting in church and just open the Bible and flip it to the back and be reading the Revelations and be like, oh my God, this is insane. Like, this is
well, the Revelations is trippy as
Yeah.
well. I mean, I think a lot of the early Old Testament stuff, even like, you know, Genesis, and even like a lot of like the Exodus stuff, I think it's very psychedelic. I mean, a lot of the concepts, and certainly, you know, one of the things I've got a trip report I keep meaning to make, and I've just not quite gotten around to it yet, because I don't think I've actually quite fully processed what happened yet. But basically, I had, and this was also on ayahuasca, of, you know, these, it's kind of become like a popular term now, of these like biblically accurate angels. And when you read about those things in like the biblical text, and like for those to manifest within, you know, my sort of ayahuasca experience, and it's never happened before, but there's something very biomechanical about these kind of, you know, these often in these rotating wheels within wheels all covered in eyes, and they sort of seem somehow mechanical, and like when you actually read the stuff that's in the Bible about those kind of things, it's quite fascinating. Some really good breakdown videos of it on YouTube about, like, you know, what are biblically accurate angels, and they also, if you read it in the Bible, seem like a form of technology, like a form of technology that like God has to give commands to, almost like like in a way we would give commands to like an AI or something. Like he said, you know, destroy the walls of Jericho, you know, like kill every second body. The very specific instructions, and these things just carry it out like almost like perfectly, and then they have to be told to stop. And I mean, that I will say that trip was absolutely horrifying. Like being confronted with this like just all-powerful beings, and I just felt like a worm in front of them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it comes like, a lot of people would say something like the Bible is inspired by psychedelics. I wouldn't say it's impossible. There's some trippy shit in there.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I'm dying to hear that trip report, man. Please. Yeah. Once you fully process that, please.
Yeah. I think the bit I'm struggling with it is the kind of like the bit of, okay, what did this mean to me? Like what did I, that's what I always try and close my videos on, like, is what, and I think I've got an idea, but it's still, it's kind of rough because it was just it was a heavy experience. Just again, just one of those things of just being before, we like we talked, being like something that was like truly like eldritch or Lovecraftian. It's like you are just what it is incomprehensible to you, to the point where it's just your nervous system just shuts down, and you just, the classic sort of psychedelic, I feel like I'm dying sort of thing. It was just like nervous system overload.
When was that?
That was back in 2022, and that was the summer of 2022, and I was again back on a retreat in Peru, and I've always had this kind of this almost like this sequence to my retreats, whereby first 2 nights pretty heavy, a lot of purging and stuff like that. Third night, divine, absolute divinity. And I think I got a little bit cocky with it, and so I was on this retreat. I was there for 2 weeks and did the first 2 nights, throwing up and stuff like that. Got to the third night, and the shaman sort of comes up to me, and you tell them your intention, like, what you want them to try and like invoke for you. And so I said, I want to meet God. I want to understand God. And so I was like, oh, okay. And so I go and drink a dose, and then they start singing, and I was sat there and like just nothing was happening. And sometimes that happens. You're like, oh, fucking hell, here's me. I thought this was going to be my big, awesome, divine night, but nothing was going down. And then he came with this Raphael, the shaman. He came and sat in front of me, and he said, "Hey Rob, but how you doing?" I said, "Yeah, mate, nothing's like, I really meet the divine, like the Divino." And cloud of Visio, and he said, okay. And so he just kind of like started singing in front of me, and just waves were coming off him, and just this experience kicked in, and I was just faced with this like ball of burning creation, just surrounded by like choirs of these like bioconstruct opening wheels rotating within wheels' eyes, and it was just pure like math and calculus and like celestial mechanics were just coming out of it, just completely overlearned. And I was looking at this thing, and it was just like burning the soul out of me. And I was just like, what was I thinking that I was ready to meet this? Like, I am a fucking worm. And like, and maybe that was the lesson. Maybe that's what I need to put in the bit. Like, just like, okay, don't get cocky, dude. Like, just. But it was excruciating. I was like, all night. I was like I called the shaman. I'm like, please, dude, you got to make this stop. This is way too much. Wow. Like, and then I was like needing to shit and stuff. And like I was just trying to stagger around to the toilets. Oh, it was a brutal night. But it taught me some humility. I'll put it that way.
Whoa. Wow.
So it's not all unicorns and rainbows, mate.
Right. That sounds incredible in like a sublime and terrifying way.
Well, it was like, it had that vibe to it of like sort of one of my like favorite movies from when I was a kid, which is Raiders of the Lost Ark, and the part at the end where they open the Ark of the Covenant, and like Indiana Jones knows to keep his eyes closed because to be humble before God, and all the Nazis don't, and so they all get just shredded by. You've seen Raiders of the Lost Ark, I take it.
Maybe a long time
you need
ago.
to go.
I'll go rewatch it.
Yeah, so. But basically, it invokes this. Like, even as a kid, I like just recognized, like, holy shit, something really mystical just happened, and Indiana Jones knew to be humble before and keep his head down and close his eyes, and that spurred him. And there is something, like I say, it's this knife edge thing within psychedelics where it's like you've got to try and find that line between humility and curiosity, because of course you want to see the divine and you want to experience the divine, but you've also got to be humble about it and aware of your own. You know, sometimes, yeah, it's you know, you can be in the presence of the divine, but you maybe just need to keep your eyes closed, keep your head down. You know, get on your fucking knees. You know, like come there with the right sense of being to it. Whereas I was just kind of like, you know what, I paid my fucking money. I want my fucking God experience. Like, listen, it's night number 3. Come on, Raphael, give me the shit. And I think my head was up my ass, and it bitch slapped me. It absolutely knocked the fucking living piss out of me.
Wow.
And I was at that point I was thinking, I'm never doing this again. And luckily I didn't. I got back on the horse the next night.
Yeah.
But fuck me, man, it was it was brutal.
That sounds insane. Well, yeah, I don't want to hold you too long, but if you have more time, I do want to ask you some stuff about DMT, but if not, we can save that for next time.
I'm good, mate. You
okay.
That's great. I'm having a blast.
Okay, cool. Yeah, me too. So, you know, I was going through your videos. I did a mix of, I was looking at your oldest videos because I was curious about, like, you know, your YouTube journey and how you started, how you got here. And then I looked at the ones that, like, had the most views or whatever, just because, like, that's what people probably know you for. And then, yeah, it was the DMT stuff on the latter category. And in one of your trip reports, you mentioned it being, like, this kind of big shift in your perspective. It was the DMT chat room experience where you feel like you're in this room of consciousness. All these beings go here from various planets and dimensions or whatever. It sounded really cool. So, but what I'm wondering about that, maybe you can give like a tiny summary of that for people who haven't seen that video. But also, what was the change that happened to you from that?
Yeah, so the kind of the condensed version of it is, yeah, I mean, for me, like DMT was the absolute game changer in my experience with all psychedelics. It's what changed things for me from being, this is recreational and that there's some, like, a lot of fun to be had here and some, you know, to like, whoa, this is mystical. This is this kind of this possibility of completely different forms of reality. That really all started with me with DMT about probably about 10 years ago now. And that was what then led me to, you know, exploring things like ayahuasca. And it was really that capability to have an experience like that. And so the experience was was basically finding myself within what seemed like, because for me, a lot of my DMT experience, what makes DMT so kind of unique and interesting, it has this very sci-fi feel to it. It's often my DMT experiences are very cosmic, kind of out there, and this was, I think, one of the first ones that really took that sci-fi-ness to a whole new level. So there was some kind of, it was like some sort of space station orbiting some sort of, like, you know, super massive, you know, celestial object, like, I don't know, sort of like Jupiter crossed with Saturn crossed with fucking something, you know, astounding. And it was just full of like alien creatures, all communicating telepathically. And I think I recognized that these weren't actually creatures in a place, that these were all just conscious systems. And what was explained to me as I was going, like, basically the universe is like a series of puzzles or equations or calculations or things to be tried. Like, you know, like you could think almost like the universe as a sandbox of things to be tried. Like, what is it like to be Tyler? Well, I don't know. Let's run the Tyler program, and here you are. You know, you are a series of code executing the Tyler program, just like I'm executing the Rob sort of program. And, you know, our solar system is executing the sort of the Milky Way. Is like, what would a Milky Way look like? Well, there you go. And this seemed to be like the place where that was being sort of, those ideas were being generated, that sort of from the smallest thing of like, what does what is the pattern of a tree growing like, through to what is the celestial mechanics of the entire universe. And it had I remember part of it was that there was all these conscious systems, and the problem that was kind of presented to me was that the universe is so vast and life is so different from, even on our own planet, from human beings through to ants, through to dolphins and honeybees or whatever, never mind through to aliens in gaseous form, or silicon form, or whatever, through AI or whatever. So life is so different, and communication is so difficult, and the universe is so vast, but yet consciousness seems to have this desire to interact with itself. So how do you solve that problem? And the answer was principally like, through something like DMT, that it creates a space for conscious systems to interact. So these beings I was seeing around me were things like whales and bees, but like, the Alpha Centauri version of a whale or whatever. It was conscious systems that had found the kind of like the chemical key to meet within this hyperspace chat room, where, because it was kind of, there's an element of like telepathy and sort of pure consciousness to it, then suddenly language it's not the hurdle to overcome. So this was just like completely fucking jaw-dropping to me, and this was explained to me with like the clarity of a sci-fi novel, which seemed to be something I could not have come up with myself. No, I mean, possibly could, but that level of imagination I felt was beyond the scope of my imagination at the time. And it felt very fully baked. Right. It seemed like very. It wasn't something I was thinking about. It was just delivered to me as a monologue telepathically by being in this place, and I thought that was like it was just, just completely astounding. That it felt very, also like just reassuring that there was some kind of purpose to all this, and that there was some sort of like meaning and collaboration, and that there's it was kind of explained to me that that consciousness is a kind of a collective field, something like gravity, and that we are kind of instances of this, that we break off from to have this experience of matter, because this is what consciousness can't have, is the kind of the human experience. But in doing so, we're kind of generating more data that we will like re-upload into as we die and rejoin that sort of stream. And so this, like I said, a very fully baked sort of theology to it. And so, I mean, that to me was completely game changer. And one of the aspects to it, which I can't remember if it came in that particular trip or another one, was at the time I was having a lot of anxiety about death. I was having real problems with anxiety at one point in my life. And it just kind of explained to me, it's like, dude, it's okay. You come in through that door and you're going to go out through that door, and it's okay. And this was kind of like basically an analogy for life. It's like, you come in, you do the thing, and you go out. And the time in between, it doesn't really matter. Like, don't get hung up on it. Don't let it fuck up your time in the process. It's going to happen. That happens, and that's going to happen. And I found that incredibly reassuring, and my anxiety around death had dropped off within the space of that 10-minute DMT trip. Wow. So I mean, I think DMT is absolutely extraordinary as a substance, and a lot of people kind of say that they think it's kind of meaningless, weird, random shit, and there certainly is some of that in it, but I think there's also some incredibly profound capability in there. I don't think it's necessarily in the same kind of healing way as what we described with ayahuasca, but I think there's more to it than just like wacky random shit. And I think the power of DMT really does come from that, what I think is that boundless unleashing of imagination. So that, so whether all this stuff did actually come from me or not, it was kickstarted by this DMT, or whether it was beamed into my head by hyperdimensional aliens or whatever. I don't know. I don't really care. But it's that to me is it's kind of it's that that narrativeness, and also that it leaves your ego fully intact to move this. And I think a lot of people like overhype, in my opinion, like things like ego death, which I think is it can also be a very useful experience, but also the ability to have your ego be intact through such a fantastic journey, and then it really forces you to sort of like, I mean, that's kind of what it did when I skipped it. It forces you to sort of adjust to that, because it's not like it just breaks your ego apart and then you have to sort of rebuild it around your structure. It's like it's encouraging you to think like, okay, well, what are you going to do with this then? You can't not have this experience. It's happened to you. What are you going to do with it, Rob? And so that's, I think, something, truly like magical about DMT. I can't remember what was the second part of your question. Sorry.
Well, you kind of answered it. How this changed your general worldview.
Yeah, I mean, it really was. I would say it was DMT that shattered my skepticism because. That sounds a bit extreme because, like I say, I do still have a lot of that kind of skeptical aspects, but I think it tempered it somewhat. So it tempered it from just me being an arsehole into perhaps something more productive.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was certainly my first foray into like a truly mystical experience, and it did. That whole thing of that, anxiety, and my anxieties about death. I mean, you could view that as a form of healing. I wasn't directly going looking for that. So I did, again. I think vaped DMT is somewhat being overlooked as I think people are looking at it a bit much as in like it's just where the really wacky shit is. And I think, I mean, there's no doubt what happens there is completely bonkers. And that's, almost that kind of part of the appeal of it. I wonder whether it's, and I think this is one of the things where ayahuasca is kind of useful. Like, I wonder, is there a way to, it's not the perfect choice of words, but I'll go with it anyway, to kind of like to tame or moderate that experience? Like, is there a form of spiritual technology that could make that DMT experience more consistently useful? Don't know. But I that's something I think would be useful to see if, like, could there be like a like a vaped DMT church or something like that, where that becomes the kind of like the sacrament, or is that, I don't know whether that's like kind of going too far, or I don't know, but I for me, I think, I mean, if I had to pick a psychedelic, I would say it's probably DMT is my favorite. Yeah. It's had this. I mean, a lot of the content on my channel has been inspired by DMT, and also I just find that whenever I take it, my creativity just goes fucking bananas.
Really?
Like, sometimes in very extreme, like, I have had some nuts ideas on DMT about like ways to create content. I was thinking once of like what turned into where I was going to do like DMT straight for like 30 days. And originally I was planning to like live stream that and shit. Like, I was planning on having like cameras set up and I was thinking almost like Big Brother, but like, and I was thinking, oh my God, this is just going too far, Rob. Just do it and then talk about it later. So yeah, I think it does need something to moderate it, but it's, I've come up with entire entire systems of thought and belief on DMT and then forgotten them 30 seconds later.
Right.
it's incredible.
Man, so yeah, that's the reason that I wanted to ask you about ayahuasca and DMT, is not only your content being focused on it, but like, these are the things I've yet to try. I'm a pretty experienced psychonaut, but it hasn't come around to where I experienced DMT yet. And I have a friend who's offered it to me, and I'm just like waiting for it to feel like the right moment. And I think I'm at that point in my life where it feels like the right time, but there's still a bit of fear. And I understand that it seems like your ego stays intact. So do you think any of that fear is warranted? Because it gets built up, right? Most powerful psychedelic in the world,
Yeah. Well, I mean, it depends. I think this is. I think when people tend to talk about fear from psychedelics, we think in terms of. I guess most people would associate that something like LSD or mushrooms, or you're having a bad trip. Now that doesn't really apply as much to DMT because the trip is so short. I personally have not really had a bad experience on it, and that said, I have seen people have a bad experience. So I know it's not all super rosy, but certainly I've seen a lot less people have bad experiences on DMT than I have where people like freak out on mushrooms, just because the time barrier doesn't really allow it as much. But I mean, it can absolutely rattle you to your core, because I'd done things like mushrooms, ketamine, MDMA, pretty much like every substance I could get my hands on until DMT, and then having that complete reality swap, even like from the deepest like LSD and mushroom trip, like I had never experienced anything like that, where I was it was another reality. That was just the fact of it. It was, and there would have been no point, saying to myself, "No, Rob, you're just on drugs or whatever like that." That wouldn't have mattered. I was having that experience, and that was what was in front of me, and it is so vivid. And I've seen people most people come back from it with the kind of like, "What the fuck? That's just incredible. That's I did not know that was possible." But it is a reality shaker. You can come back and, certainly you can see this in a lot of the, trip reports, or, people who comment on like mine and Vivek's videos and stuff like that, where like, yeah, I think it would be naive to say that this is not capable of disturbing people, possibly in ways where they don't know they're being disturbed. So is there something to fear in that, rather than the fear of the experience itself? Yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, none of us want to go fucking mad, and if you go mad, would you know does the madman know they're mad? Probably not. I mean, that's even more terrifying, that someone could be acting in a way which seems completely consistent to them, but they're actually in some sort of manic episode, and perhaps they're actually just completely unraveling, and that's like I talked about earlier, that sort of knife edge of walking, where that is one, as you walk that path of consciousness through these very deep psychedelic states, then one outcome of that is the complete unraveling of your psychology, your psyche. So yeah, I mean, it's for that reason, I think it's not something to be fucked with, but it is. I mean, you could apply this to a lot of psychedelics. I think it is worth exploring, but I think you're absolutely right in that to do it at the right time, for when it makes sense to you. Like I said, I do not know what I would have been like if I'd have got my hands on DMT in my, say, early 20s. I think we would have a completely different outcome from the person that you're talking to now. And so I think for me, that was pure fluke, that it was just, I was somewhat in my 30s, somewhat more, a bit more mature, a bit more sort of stable. So had already had my family to sort of support me and stuff like that. So I kind of feel quite lucky in that regard. But yeah, it is a reality shaker, and that shake can be a good thing, or it could be a bad thing. But if the way I kind of would view it is like with anything. If you feel the sort of the call for it, there's no sword over your head. Don't feel like sort of pressured into it. And if you kind of as aware as what you can be of what's in store for you in terms of, this is the potential here when done correctly is an absolute reality, like a rewriting of what you think reality is, to the point where even like a diehard sort of skeptic atheist is now having conversations about biblically accurate angels in front of God and stuff. It's it's just like a roll the dice, but just be aware that that's it. I think that's part of it as well. Is just be able to take accountability for those outcomes. So it's like, and I think if you are somewhat aware that these are the possible outcomes, then it also kind of steels yourself against them, because you can sort of, what one things that I did with my sort of support network is when I was. What I found is that when you're in those kind of psychedelic states and there's a lot going on and there's a lot of confusion, the capability, or at least my capability, to even explain what is going on, and in a way that communicates something to someone I'm trying to communicate it to, is just completely compromised. So we just came up with a system of, look, we'll just have a series of lights. It's like, someone says to you, like, how are you doing? You could just say, yeah, I'm doing fine. Or if I say, look, code yellow, like, that would be like, look, I'm struggling a little bit, but I think I can get through it. Like, code red, like, I'm really fucking struggling here, like, or if I just like code black, it means like, get me out of here. I'm not capable of that. I'm not capable of being an adult now. Just fucking get me out of this. I need to get out of here, but I can't explain this. Just code black, and just having sort of, like I said, like that support of people who can sort of help you through what can be a fucking like a complete reality wiring experience. And so just I would recommend having somebody there with you who you can talk to. Just make sure you've got that sort of network of people, because if you have experiences anything like what I've kind of described, then you can find yourself having to integrate some very like very positive, but very like, well, shit, what does this mean? Like I thought I understood which way was up and which way was down, and now I'm just in free, it's a psychological free fall. So yeah, mate, like I said, I just try and I wouldn't ever want to put somebody off the DMT experience, and I would, particularly for like a psychonaut, I would say if you get the opportunity, go for it. But yeah, it's certainly not something to be taken lightly and fucked with, and which again, it ties into why I'm kind of so wary of these readily available like vape pens and shit being sold online on Instagram and stuff. Right.
Well, yeah, even given all of what you just said, like, I think I'm ready. I'm gonna go for it, and I think I just needed a little tip. What were you gonna say?
Well, do you know what, mate? I would say I'm always kind of envious of people who get to do that for the first time, because first of all, just because it's fucking incredible, and and also the other thing which seems to be like an unfortunate side effect of DMT is that once you've had that kind of experience, what you'll find is that as you go back subsequent times, you'll actually start feeling a lot more anxiety about going into it. And so this is like very, very common sort of phenomenon. And I've got a theory of why that is. And it's basically, your brain is trying to maintain sort of like homeostasis of like this. And then your kind of unconscious knows that you are about to just fucking roll those dice, and your brain just saying, no. And you will feel like by the time you get like a little window of like your first like 4 or 5 times where you're just like, this is amazing, I'll do this all the time. And then by about like time number 6, you're thinking, you feel like almost like, if you're ever at school and you knew that like the school bullies waiting for you outside and they're going to kick your head in all seals, and like you got that butterfly, it's not that anxiety, like, where is this coming from? And your body your brain just starts recoiling against it. And so becomes like a struggle that you have to like get over. Like that's like the entrance price of that experience. But it's something, and it comes on so fast. It's so fucking strange.
Yeah, there's no chance of fighting.
You're kind of used to like, you used to kind of like, your mushroom trips and your acid trips, like, oh, here we go, and it's sort of you glide into it. Again, same with ayahuasca, you kind of glide into it. DMT is you just watch reality reassemble itself within the space of like 10 seconds. It's bananas.
That sounds insane.
So yeah, can be very disconcerting. but absolutely incredible. Would recommend.
I'll let you know how it goes, man. I'll tell you how it goes. So my friend,
Yeah, please do, dude.
my friend's who's offered it to me is real experienced with it, and his suggestion for like going into it is to have like 2 initial experiences and have the second one be aiming for like kind of a breakthrough. So I think his thing was like start off at like 35 milligrams and then like 45 or something a little bit higher. Would you say that would be like a reasonable starting point, or would you do it any differently?
No, I think that's pretty reasonable. It's more or less kind of what I did, and I think it's good. My first experience with DMT wasn't a breakthrough. I think it was about my 5th or 6th time with it before I had like the full breakthrough, and it was actually useful to be able to dip into it that way. And that said, having that, what you would call like a small DMT experience is still it was the most psychedelic thing I'd ever experienced in my life until then. But I could tell it wasn't the full reality swap. But I was just, I remember lying there having it for the first time, and just sacred geometry just pouring out the ceiling again, and just I looked across at my sofa, and just all this Inca Aztec pyramids and stuff was just scrolling across like a sort of like a Dead Sea Scroll tapestry thing across the couch. And I was like, this is like, what the fuck? This is amazing. And it was that actually gave me kind of like, and that feeling of homeness was very, like, I knew this place instantly. I was like, and I remember thinking like, of course it's this. Like, Rob, you fucking idiot. Of course it's like, what else would it be? Of course it feels like this, and it kind of that gave me the kind of the boost to think, okay, right, let's go a bit further. So I would absolutely recommend, sort of doing that, and I think that's a good stepping stone into it, rather than going straight for the kind of like straight for the breakthrough, because the breakthroughs can be quite tricky to get at first, and especially if you kind of you're not sure where you are with this substance, but you're trying to overload your body with it within such a short window of time to get there. So yeah, I think what your friend set out is very reasonable.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks, man. I think that pretty much gets to everything I had written down. It was really fun to pick your brain, and and I appreciate getting to know you a little bit and interacting in the virtual world. Our psychedelic Uncle Rob.
Do you know what? I was kind of wondering when like within the group that we're in now, and I'd never quite seen myself as this, but I'm like, oh god, I'm like the old one. I'm like the wizened elder. So I mean, my hair's already starting going grey, and I'm like, okay, I'm like, is that me now? I'd always thought I was like the young funky one, but I'm sort of I think that torch is being passed now. I see like guys like Gabe and stuff like that. I'm like, oh right, yeah, that's the kind of the spirit that I had like 20 odd years ago. And, I'm assuming a lot of you guys are like a lot younger than me. I'm like, oh wow, but it's and that's one of the reasons I'm so kind of grateful for these kind of like these panel conversations. It's kind of nice that we just meet as sort of like a flat hierarchy of peers, even though some of us are working as like professionals and within this field, and some of us are just usually some of us have got channels bigger than the other, and but we're all I think we all value what each other say, and people are often different things around workflows and how to do it, and I'm just so grateful to sort of be a part of that, and to have some part, and to get to talk to you like this, mate. It's always like an absolute privilege for me that anybody wants to talk to me or listen to me. So I'm really grateful, man. And this conversation has been an absolute blast. So thanks a lot for organising. We'll have to do it the other way around, mate. We'll have to have you on my channel soon, and we can I'll pick your brains. I tell you what, after you've had the DMT experience, let's have a real deep dive and like just absolute brain fart about what happened there. As you sat there with your third eye glued on, having crystals stuck on top of your head. Like, I'll try and talk you down. Tyler, come on.
Yeah, you're like, oh, I guess you've had DMT, huh?
All right then, mate.
All right, man. Well, thanks a lot.
No, it's my pleasure, dude. It's been great.
All right, see you soon.